But there's this great Ralph Waldo Emerson quote that always do what you're afraid to do. And I'm struck with kind of, as they talk about upbringing, sort of always being, and I think part of it has to do with being an African-American male, where it's like, you don't get second chances. So you got to be very conservative, risk-free, don't mess up. And so you're kind of afraid to step outside of your box in a lot of ways. It's like, I'm a lawyer. I got to be a lawyer. I got to do corporate. And so doing this, push the envelope, I wasn't sure how people were going to react. And then we put it out there, and just like the feedback was so amazing. Even my kids who listen to Wow in the World podcast, and they, they love podcasts. They're like, "Daddy has a podcast, and it has a song." So it's a great song. It's a great song. So it's just been great, and it goes back to sometimes you just have to do what you're afraid to do, and that's being courageous.
Yeah, we were recently on a long drive, and Bars hadn't listened to one of the episodes yet, so we put it on, and the kids were playing in the background. They were doing all their own thing, and all of a sudden, my son looked up and was like, "Mommy, is that your voice? Is that you? Are you on the car?" Yes, that's me, baby. He's so proud.
That's great.
Big and Kavi Proud, who just turned 4.
4 years old, big bad 4.
Wow.
Well, I'll turn it to you. You're kind of the brainchild. You've done a lot of legwork around this. You make it easy for Shivani and me to do this.
That's for sure.
What sticks out to you?
I think it is that really putting yourself out there, and you think, like, I've facilitated and been in leadership work for the last 8 to 10 years, but this is totally different, right. And you're all of a sudden you're on Apple. Then you see it on Spotify, and you see your logo, and then you hear your voice, and you're like, oh, wow, this is now out for the whole world. But I think who you build it with is what we have talked about is so important. And we recently, you and I, Brandon, had a very deep conversation about, it was about race, and it was related to the episode about Ufuru and how, especially me being a white male, there's a lot of advantage and privileges I have around being optimistic about things. And to what you just said, I can take more risks. And then hearing you talk about just the burdens of loads you've had to carry as a black male. And I was sitting in a parking lot in Isle Palms Park, and I'm sitting under a tree, and I honestly started crying. And because it occurred to me that this was much more than a podcast. And it was the first time I noticed even me getting anxious about how many Instagram posts are we getting? Who have we sent this to? How many? And then I was like, wait a minute, that's not what this is. This is just what we had to categorize this as something, right? Western society, you got a podcast, YouTube, right? You got to call it something so the masses can get to it. But for us, it's like this opportunity to learn and grow. And after that conversation, for me, it was just like I felt my heart had expanded. I understood you more, and I've known you 8 years. And Shivani, you and I have recently had conversations about personal history I have around trauma and healing. And so that's the part for me that I keep trying to remind myself that this is what this is.
You got deep early on. I didn't know we were going that deep this morning. But I will, to talk about that conversation we had, there's a lot of learning. I think a lot of times you take it away as the burdens that I have experienced, yes, in my role. But what I took away from you is that, maybe I have a good support network. So maybe these burdens that I'm feeling, I can share with someone. Or maybe I can let them go a little bit and step outside and still receive the support. And maybe some of that, I'm able to put some of that risk to the side, or I would say adverse risk taking to the side. So I thought that was a really good conversation.
Yeah, it was just being the sense of like that sense of safety and security, right? Like even when it is a little bit outside your comfort zone, when you know that you're in kind of safe hands or a safe environment. Even for like when you talked about with trauma, right? Even when you've experienced that, if you have a safe, comforting place to go, you can kind of deal with it and process it more as well.
Yeah, it's so true, and I think maybe that's actually, I didn't think about it till now, of what is like when you are in a very much a growth environment and you are putting yourself out there, when you have a very safe group of people where we can make mistakes, right? Yeah. And we've made mistakes on, things I've said, you said,
right.
but it's like,
Yeah.
hey, I can also challenge you from love. And Shivani, knowing too your background, I just, over the years you've shared different things on resilience and trauma, and I was like, oh yeah, no, that makes sense for what you do. But then in some recent personal work I've done to recognize, that there's things I went through. That was also what was meaningful to me, because I was like, there's no accident that we're in this conversation, that you've been sharing these things with me, and